Hi, I'm Scott Olson, co-founder of LTCshop.com and author of Long-Term Care Insurance Now. Every few years, usually around the month of November, there's a New York Times article about long-term care insurance. Most New York Times articles about long-term care insurance have a negative slant. For example, in 2023, the headline read, "Why Long-Term Care Insurance Falls Short for So Many." This article had so many half-truths and omitted so many critical details. It took me 8 separate blog posts to set the record straight. The writers contradict themselves in the first few sentences. Directly beneath the title, it reads, "The private insurance market has proved wildly inadequate in providing financial security for millions of older Americans, in part by underestimating how many policyholders would use their coverage." They say long-term care insurance is wildly inadequate because insurance companies have paid more claims than they had expected. That makes it inadequate? The insurance companies are paying a lot more in claims than they had ever projected, and the New York Times concludes that's why the policies have fallen short? The fact that the insurance companies have paid a lot more in claims than they had projected, in my view, is a good thing. That's a very good thing. But this isn't new for the New York Times. Back in 2015, the New York Times headline cried out, "Long-term care insurance can baffle with complex policies and costs." A few years earlier, in 2010, the New York Times headline was even more ominous. It read, "Long-term care insurance begins to fade away." Now, this was back in 2010. There are more long-term care insurance policyholders today in 2025 than there were in 2010. Now, the most famous New York Times article about long-term care insurance was written in 2007. That's right, 18 years ago. Its headline read, "Aged, frail, and denied care by their insurers." In that article, the Times narrative was that the long-term care insurance industry was doing everything it could to avoid paying long-term care insurance claims. The scathing article in 2007 by the Times got the attention of the federal government. Congress held investigative hearings in 2008 on the issue of claims payment practices in the long-term care insurance industry. The U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging ordered that an audit be done of long-term care insurance claims practices. The audit was conducted over a 22-month period in 2008 and 2009. The audit reviewed both approved and denied claims from 7 of the leading long-term care insurers. At that time, those 7 insurance companies counted for over 70% of the long-term care insurance claims. And the audit included every claim that was denied by some of those insurers. The audit was summarized in a 20-page report. You can read it on the Department of Health and Human Services website. You can link to the report in the show notes. Here are a few important points made in the report. And I'm quoting, "There is a low incidence of disagreement between the clinical audit team and the insurance company adjudicators, particularly when it comes to denied claims." In other words, the auditors agreed with the insurance company's claims decisions, especially in regards to which claims should be denied. The report also stated there is a greater probability of approving rather than denying a questionable claim. I'll say it again. This quote is taken directly from the auditor's report. It says there is a greater probability of approving rather than denying a questionable claim. That's the exact opposite of what the New York Times article alleged. In other words, the 2007 New York Times article about long-term care insurance overreached. The vast majority of long-term care insurance claims were being and continue to be processed accurately, especially for policies that meet the federal guidelines for long-term care insurance. So over the next several episodes, we're going to take a look at the 2023 New York Times article about long-term care insurance. I'm going to be even-handed. I'm going to talk about some things that they said right and some things that they said that were not so right.